What ties this week's stories together is just how little friction there is. You've got AI generating vulnerable code that makes its way straight into production. At the same time, lower skill operators are using those same tools to scale attacks that used to require real expertise. Then you look at what happens after access shows up. China linked groups are sitting inside environments long term, and in some cases, even the firewall itself is the foothold. And when attackers do move, they're not tripping alarms. They're building custom paths to move data out undetected. So a common thread here is access being inherited, scaled, protected in ways that most teams aren't really going to validate. I'm Sean McMillan, Community Manager here at Bishop Fox, and I'm joined this week by Senior Managing Operator 2, Richard Brown, Managing Senior Consultant 2, Shad Malloy, Senior Operator Dylan Sparks, and Senior Security Engineer and Exploit Developer John Untz. Thanks for joining.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a lot of stories to get through this week, but I want to start with this direct access. Watchtower found an auth bypass in cPanel and WHM, which is basically a control layer for a huge portion of the internet. We're talking tens of millions of domains, and they found you can manipulate how sessions are handled and trick the system into treating you as authenticated, potentially even root, without any valid credentials. This is the kind of initial access that we're used to, where you have a bug, you break authentication, and you get access. And it looks like this is being exploited in the wild with tens of millions of domains affected. There's got to be a massive amount of them that have no idea. They're not maintained, they're unpatched. What determines whether this turns into real access in the wild?
I'm going to tee up our exploit developer here because I read the Watchtower Labs and I got about 2/3 of it, maybe. I could probably pick up a little bit more on the read through, but I want to hear, because I thought it was great work, like just reading through kind of all the dead ends and false positives they went through and to get it working. And I want to hear an exploit dev's side of that.
So yeah, I think part of it is like, when you talk about how like wide scale something becomes, the ease of development is certainly a good part of it, but I think it's more the stability of it. I think what even if it's like super hard to like figure out the bug, like we're finding that a lot more now with like a lot of your like a lot more of your recent big exploit stories have been things that may have been harder for like the human researcher to find. Like the recent Linux privilege escalation was heavily AI like assisted as far as like the discovery. Those things are maybe harder to like develop for, but the stability of it is really kind of the big key win with those. Because if you can nail it down to where like it's like almost like a fire and forget, to me, like that's what leads to like these are your solid exploits. Is if I don't have to really do much finessing, once I've nailed it down, I don't have to like I don't have to come up with new ways to like groom a heap, stack, overflow kind of thing. Like I just have to point it at a target and hit fire. That's the best exploit.
Yeah. And just the wide range of what this impacted. I know when my team saw this and picked it up and ran with it, it's like, okay, we have everything mapped out of what plants are running, what cPanel version, what's impacted. I think it was Dylan and Nathan were like, everything.
Yeah.
Everything is impacted.
Oh, you have cPanel? Yeah.
Yeah.
If it has a pulse, it's a problem.
And that's something that the scary part is when a vulnerability is that rampant. It's in every version. Literally, there are people who are in the live versions that can't update. Their system won't support the newer version, right? They're just SOL right now. I know cPanel released some indicators of compromise, which was fantastic. I know the Watchtower blog had it. Asset Note had a couple in there. Definitely check for those if you can't update. As always, update or a segment from the internet. But yeah, this was a bad one for sure.
One of the things. Oh, go ahead. Won't step on.
I was going to say this one's really cool just because it felt very like methodical, carefully mapped out. They're actually mapping the authentication flow and understanding, how do I use what I got from this limited response to then manipulate and abuse this service as it's not intended. And that to me is like the core of initial access and hacking methodology. And it was just cool to see that kind of on display. I mean, not cool for everyone else, but made for a sick write-up.
Like, it's impressive. It's not good. It's impressive. Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's a good phrase.
So what does this kind of say about the state of how much of the internet is just essentially abandoned, but still reachable?
Yeah. One of the things that we think about is like co-location facilities or like that hardware that you got from that vendor that one time and they're out of business, but it's still sitting in your rack because you pull reports from it once a quarter or something. Like we don't even know about that stuff. Like, like bigger hosting companies are probably on top of this, but like smaller shops and like one person IT places, like they potentially just have cPanel and nobody knows.
Yeah, we've talked a lot here before about like like the difference between like we sit a lot on the side on like the technical decisions, and we're kind of gated away from a lot of those business decisions that really kind of lead to stuff like this, where you have, like you said, like unpatched systems they're not unpatched because admins are lazy or anything like that. They're unpatched because they're end of life, and they're end of life because they work. Like they still function. They still provide the core function that business needs. And for XYZ reason, like they're not able to or don't see it as a priority to upgrade to some new bells and whistles kind of device.
Yeah. And just to piggyback, got kind of off what Shad was talking about too, especially these smaller firms where they had Melissa who worked there and she built this report generator and then she left, but now no one can touch it because she's only knew how it worked. And then they just leave it on the internet because they don't know any better. Yeah, definitely impactful one.
Yeah.
We'll see some ways for this for a while.
Yeah. I think shadow IT is a common thread too with a lot of these vulnerabilities that we're seeing. So again, to Richard's point, like somebody came in, built an application, and then there's no knowledge base built around it. Right. So one, no one knows it's there. And then two, no one knows how it functions or what what tearing it down actually means for the business side of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, with cloud computing and everything, we're seeing shadow IT more and more from that perspective because people are just spinning up images here and there. They're accidentally exposing dev environments and things like that. So we're seeing a little bit more of that as well.
Yeah. Now, let me ask, if you are looking at this as an attacker, hypothetically, what are you trying to figure out first? Like, where do you start in terms of domains? Is it like how long it might stay unpatched or what you do once you're in?
I think it's going to be a race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're probably going to be fighting off other attackers when you get in there.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe, I don't know, maybe start at the bottom of the list.
Start in the middle. No one will expect that.
Yeah, we saw something similar when Mongo had that big vulnerability where people would hack into Mongo databases, they'd encrypt everything, and then they'd ransom you out, right? But you couldn't patch it because you were locked out of your own account, but then hackers could hack in, and there were people paying ransoms to get unencrypted data, but the data that they were getting was encrypted by someone else now, right? So like, it just was this chain of like, cool, here's your data that we encrypted, but just so you know, here's another ransom letter from someone else who was here first. So go
like
pay them as
graffiti
well.
tagging.
Yeah. So yeah, I think like Shad was saying, just get there first and bed down, lock everyone else out.
What makes this interesting is just the scope of it, right? Like all of the versions that are impacted by this, right? Because it's the same authentication mechanism used throughout a lot of these releases. So you have, I would say, like speed and identification is going to be first and foremost. It doesn't matter what version. I don't really have to be as narrow and focused with this one. I just need to hit something cPanel or WHM, and then I'm building out my target pool. And then from there, I can narrow down if there's specific versions that respond to it or not. But for this one, you kind of have this luxury of, I don't know, man, is it cPanel or WHM? And we're good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah, your after action just kind of all sort of depends on like where am I when I land, right? If I land on a device that's like, because like you said, if it's every single one out there that's vulnerable, I could land on a mom and pop shop, or I could land on the backbone of a major IT network, and from there, what is my purpose? Am I a ransomware type of actor? Am I a nation state actor? Like at that point, like what flavor of attacker am I? That's what's going to dictate what I'm going after.
I think understanding the technology plays into that too, John. Like again, WHM and cPanel are used for two different things, right? Like two different user experiences. So from there, like you said, what do I want to go after? Do I want the keys to a singular instance, or do I want the keys to the administration panel where I can steal everybody's secret keys and then go access what?
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to another kind of group of stories related to AI as sort of an access multiplier. First up, Anthropic's Claude is pumping out vulnerable code. This is from Forbes. And essentially, Claude is getting some heat right now because researchers are seeing it generate code with a pretty high rate of vulnerabilities. In some tests, more than half the outputs had security issues baked in. Things like unsafe handling of inputs, weak authentication logic, the typical kind of stuff. And the concern is that this code is getting used by people who may not know what to even look for. And then it's getting pushed into real environments without proper review. So instead of like an occasional human developer mistake, you've got repeatable patterns of insecure code that are, of course, being generated at scale. First up, what type of tells are there in AI generated code? Are there themes to look for?
I don't want to insult the whole engineering community, but comments. If there are comments in your code,
Yeah.
it tells me AI probably wrote it. No, that's one of the bigger tells is comments. AI is very verbose on comments, even myself included. When I do a comment, it's like this function grabs a key, right? But AI is like this function grabs a key and decodes it into it's very verbose on what this function's doing, and that's a tell for me that it was written.
Are there M dashes in the comments, or is that not a thing?
Probably.
Guaranteed
There
there
are.
are. Oh my gosh.
There are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dashes
Plus
and
signs.
emojis.
They do
Right.
put a ton of
Yeah.
plus signs in the comments too.
Yeah.
Like this thing
Yeah.
plus this.
But really, since a lot of the code that we see the vulnerabilities in, they're very broken out, right? AI does a good job at segmenting usability. Whereas me, I'll do everything in one large file and just call the function separately. They'll break them out in separate files, right? So you can kind of tell when best practices are followed. It's probably AI. Not insulting engineers.
Mhm.
But like they read the documentation that if it says put this in this file, it's in that file, right? They actually
Yeah.
update the environment file and not hard code something into a TS file, right? So those kind of tells are where you can tell. But honestly, I hate to say it, even when I look at like senior engineering code, a lot of times I'll have Claude write something for me. If I'll go back and change the function calls, or maybe it did it in a way I wouldn't have done it, so I migrate over to this way and let it know I updated it. But so it's really hard to tell what was truly vibe coded with no human input at all, or what
Mhm.
was like hybrid coded between me and Claude having a conversation and changing things up.
There's a really funny meme kind of making its rounds as like vibe coding first came out. Pretty heavy in the dev community is that like you could tell the difference between a developer writing something and Claude code running something, because a random number generator is like 2 lines when a senior developer writes it, but then Claude code will write you a paragraph with like 8 comments about number theory. Like all that for a button on a page. Like, oh man.
Right.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
based on what you guys know, which environments are most likely to have this kind of stuff deployed, or is it just everywhere?
I think I'm going to steal Dylan's shadow IT thing, where like if your IT is a barrier to you like running some data analytics across stuff you have, you're going to go around them and you're going to vibe code stuff. So I would say like organizations in general just need to find a way to secure and track it, and because the genie's not going back in the bottle, right? Like it's out there and we just need to protect it instead of try to ban it.
Yeah. And especially with if you think your engineers aren't using AI, you're wrong, right? Even if you don't support it in your environment, they need it to stay current. They need it to stay abreast of what's going on. We look at the trend of layoffs going on and looking at how Twitter did theirs back in the day and looked at the commit requests. Like I can't do that every day, but I'd have Claude kick off 4 or 5 of those, right? Simple bug fixes, simple. So I think when you look at your environment and assume none of my engineers are using AI, you're already behind, and you understand that they are using it, their personal accounts, to speed their own workflows up.
It's actually really interesting too, because I think we're kind of living in this echo chamber of people that don't really understand the technology too, and they want to implement it across the entire company.
Yeah.
They're like, we need everyone on AI now. And it's like, why is our HR recruiting department being asked to build an internal dashboard and candidate tracking system?
Right.
And
Yeah.
a lot of it's because like, oh, well, tokens are cheap. Just use tokens. Everyone's a dev now. And it's just not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you start looking at places where you don't traditionally have either software development or maybe just minimal software development happening. That would be the first place I'd look for extremely vulnerable code. for sure. Because it's the same thing as like if even without take the AI part out of the picture. If you ask like you were just saying, Dylan, right? Ask HR to write software, and like that's just like don't give them an option. Just say write software, even if they don't have AI. Like it's gonna probably be vulnerable because they're not familiar with that. That's not their primary role.
Sure. So I also want to ask, we talked about how there are identifiers for this type of AI written code. I'm curious if there, like, once you've established that this is AI written code, are there themes that show up in that maybe if you're confident that this was written by Claude, you can be confident that it may possess a certain type of flaw?
I wouldn't be surprised, just because, again, I think a lot of people forget that like AI is a mathematical like algorithms of for loops, if thens, and what it does is it writes statistically plausible code, not secure code. And so what it's doing is it's basically taking a sum of the averages that it sees out there. And it's like, hey, most people are doing this. And it's like, well, as the noise and the saturation goes out, like how far off of secure are we moving that average now? And
Yeah.
like, just because that snippet of code is good doesn't mean you're implementing it correctly either.
Yeah, I was gonna say I haven't seen any IOCs out there that are like, this is definitely, command injection. Claude is going to use it every time. We're probably 6 months out from that, where somebody is like, oh, I figured this out, and I figured out how to kind of run it at scale across everything on GitHub that's publicly available. Like I would not be shocked when that one rolls out.
Yeah.
Ron can invite me back, and I can wear like an "I told you so" hat.
I love it.
I want to move on to the other side of this. We have from Wired. AI tools are helping mediocre, that seems so insulting. AI tools are helping mediocre North Korean hackers steal millions. This North Korean group ran basically an entire attack operation here. They used it to write malware, build phishing sites, create fake companies, and run parts of those interactions with the victims. They were not highly skilled operators. That's the big thing. AI filled in the gaps to the point where a larger group of less experienced attackers could still run a campaign that brought in millions. So these are familiar techniques, but now we're essentially seeing muggles doing this, so to speak, and they can spin it up incredibly fast. Is this creating new access paths or just increasing the volume of attempts against those same weak points?
Yeah, I think it's just an increase, right? Like I look at this as like the other side of the coin, right? The previous side was, if you look at, I've said it before, right? AI is just like a bunch of junior devs.
Mhm.
A bunch of junior devs are making vulnerable code, and then here a whole bunch of junior devs are hitting the same problem. Like again, I'm gonna 5 years from now, the AI is gonna kill me for saying this, but like it's like the monkey on a keyboard meme or trope of like you put a bunch of monkeys on a bunch of different keyboards. Eventually, one's gonna write Shakespeare, and like
Right.
that's pretty much the same thing that's happening here. You have just tons of AI agents working on the same problem. It's just a multiplier. Like it is eventually you're gonna hit something.
I'm going to come to the
And-
defense of our North Korean brothers and sisters, because
Yeah.
Man, this might be
Not
Chad's
the
hottest
take I
take
was
yet.
expecting
Okay,
here.
hit me.
like
Yeah.
everyone says that they're terrible. They steal a lot of money, and their job is to steal money, and they do a good job. Like you might not like them, but their tradecraft is on point for
Sure.
what they're doing.
Yeah.
So
No, 1,000%. And that's something I was going to say too, is we keep hearing how I don't get too political, but like there's no one intelligent over there, yet they have like 5 of the top hacking groups in North Korea, right? They've hacked Sony. Like, and then you hear like they have a closed internet. Their internet isn't even public. There are maybe a handful of people, we'll say 1,000 at most, that have access to the internet. And they are doing the majority of hacking for them. And now you're like, oh, these 5 people vibe coded a hack. Well, I mean, how'd they get the internet? Did they hack North Korean internet to get out to the public? Is this like a state sponsored event from like, it's just yeah. A lot of it has always been enshadowed about like how we say they don't have the knowledge to do this stuff. And then again, they have these hacking groups that take billions from us. And it's just like, I agree, Shad. I'm not going to defend them like that, but I'll definitely say that, yeah, it's just,
I
it
have
never
said they
adds up
have
to
good
me.
tradecraft. I don't like
Yeah,
them, but they have good
Yeah,
tradecraft.
I mean, they've
Well, I mean, here we are talking about them, right?
For
I mean, it's
sure.
obviously newsworthy.
Yeah. I can't remember which company they infiltrated, but wasn't someone working there for like 3 or 4 months before they found that they were
Yeah,
North Korean
I remember
spy?
last
And
year
it's
there
like,
was a story about that.
yeah,
And they were doing
so
too good
social
of work because
engineering.
they had like 4 people Like when they finally kind of tracked it down, they were like, "Yeah, we
Yeah.
got a good deal for our HR dollars."
Yeah.
Well, that's the interesting part too when you look at all of the attacks. Like they do have a ton of brute forcing attacks, right? Where they come in and punch you in the face. But what we're also seeing too in this industry is that there's targeted attacks against recruiters and recruiting firms where they are knowingly going in and under this guise or ruse of becoming an insider. And they're not applying for HR roles. They're applying for engineering positions. They're applying for roles where they're going to have access, trust. And it's a sign of sophistication, you know?
Yeah. What does if you don't need? I mean, not to insult their technical skill, but if you don't really need that deep technical skill anymore, how does that affect how we look at threat modeling?
So I think we have to go back to our conversation about vibe coded, right? So they no longer need the technical skills to be able to hack, or I should say to understand the hack fully, but they still have to have the knowledge of what they're trying to achieve. So we look at Claude, right? We'll use Anthropic as the model here. I tell it to do something. It's like, I can't do that. Cool. Try again. Try harder. Go a different route. I can keep telling it to do it over and over and over again until it finally has a solution for me. But I have to understand what I'm telling it. Because if it tells me I can't do that, I have to understand why it can't do that. And if it just says I can't do that because the session header isn't pulled anywhere, cool. What is pulled? Which of these headers are reviewed by internal code that I can poke at, right? Oh, actually, this X44 is cool. Let's go down that path right now. Okay, it's pulled into this function. Cool. What's that function do with it? Oh, it tries to write it to a file. Now we're getting somewhere. So I don't have to know that hack, but I have to know that process flow to understand like what I'm telling it to do. I can't just like let it tell me it can't do it, because then I'll just never have gone down that path.
Yeah. And I almost think this is just like a natural progression of time, right? Like we look at, like go back to like 80s pop culture hacking of like war games, you know, how many people or Ferris Bueller, that's like my go-to example a lot, right? That was a kid that like he hacked into the school and changed his tardy, or not his tardy, his attendance
Absences. Yeah.
absences, that's what it was. And you know, that was like ooh ah, but like how many people had computers in their home back then? You look at now, we all walk around with computers in our pockets. Like the generational gaps that are catching up to these just like what we once considered to be exquisite tech or exquisite skills that are now just becoming a little more mundane in nature. I think that's kind of also kind of feeding this, right? Like if you know, I've never set foot in North Korea, but like maybe that's part of the equation. There is they're a little more hands on with the grooming of their population in general. And so I have to kind of consider that maybe they're just like literally raising their population up to be better at these skill sets, to be better thieves, like you said, Chad. Or you know whichever, right? Whatever they're you know hacking for. You know, I think that's, to me, I think that's something to consider.
Yeah, I think accessibility plays a huge role, right? We look at multiple topics from education to youth sports, and everyone wants to like throw their hands up and go, the data just doesn't make sense when this one particular group starts doing better. And it's like, well, yeah, they're doing better because they've had access to this longer, right? Like they should be doing better, or like, you know, they're more practiced and more skilled. And exactly to John's point, you know, if somebody's been reviewing and, you know, manipulating tech for significantly longer, yeah, I would expect more sophisticated outcomes from them.
All right, I want to move on to our next segment here, kind of a few stories about persistence. First up, from HelpNet Security, researchers found new malware targeting Cisco Firepower firewalls that gives attackers persistent remote access, and patching doesn't remove it. In some cases, remediation requires taking the device offline and fully resetting it. So the attackers are now maintaining a foothold directly on the firewall, rather than just using it as a point of entry. Where is this trust being established that allows this kind of access to persist without any real challenge?
I had notes in our document about how this one I almost rage quit over this. So
for the record, Shad was the first person to volunteer to be on this week's episode after reading this story.
Yeah.
So The article, the way we had discussed it was this article that was written by somebody who's never had to call Mandiant on a long holiday weekend and pay that rate, because patching has never removed like the hack. It's
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys remember Configure. I'm a man of a certain age. One of the Configure worms, the way you detect it is it was patched behind itself. It dropped a non-official patch so that nobody else could come in and get access through the exploit.
Oh.
And I was like, yeah, it did that as soon as like I'm just guessing because like I've heard Dylan like operate. So sure, he's going to get in. The first thing he's going to do is establish a second path and persistence and like follow the play. Like if you came home and somebody had kicked in your door, would you just lock your door and be like, I don't need to look in any of the other rooms. Everything's fine. I your door. I was like, I literally this one got me in a place that I was almost rage quit.
That deep trauma was released. Yeah. I have to agree. I mean, I have to say that I don't understand why they thought that would fix it and didn't do any kind of due diligence. But yeah.
Yeah, nobody wants you to reboot your edge devices.
Yeah,
If you're
100%.
taking, like, there are reasons, we're not running EDR on the edge. Like, there's reasons why it doesn't happen, but I don't know if this was like a hot take on their side to get people talking about it.
What, for anyone who's kind of worried about this, what signals would actually indicate that this kind of long-term access is already in place?
I think they had like an indicator compromise. You literally just looked for, was it Lena? Like you really go like show, run, you pipe it out to look like, but I think Cisco has like a centralized management utility also, where one of the things that you could do was like, basically like, here's my golden running image. Have I drifted from that? Which you should be doing for everything, not just from a security standpoint, but also just from an admin standpoint. You should know why you're making changes. You have a change control board for a reason.
Yeah, it's this is kind of a little frustrating, like just because of like where on the network this device is. Because like my usual answer, like for for questions like this is like, we'll start watching your traffic, right? Well, this is the thing that you would specifically look for the trap. Yeah, it's like if this is the source of truth for malformed traffic direction, you can't trust that.
Yeah.
So like maybe you just at this point you gotta look at it from both directions, right? All my endpoints, am I getting like there's no reason why like the firewall should be trying to open an SMB share on my like random Windows computer on my network or whatever. So like it does, like there is still like that factor is still in place. Like you do still have to just look at what is normal. It like a good admin is should be rather looking at what is the proper flow of traffic. Is that happening in my network? And adjust accordingly. Like if you notice stuff like that, that's a good indicator that somebody's sitting at the very least. If you may not know it's sitting on like one of your trusted security devices, but you at least know there's a hole somewhere that someone's getting through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this one left. I think there were a few binaries too that were part of the indicator of compromise, right? But at the same time, who's looking at edge devices?
No,
I mean, I
right.
am because I'm a network nerd, but like they're there, right? And I feel like they don't get enough attention, and that's what the attackers are counting on, right?
Yeah.
A lot of these devices from the edge, you're going to be looking at older devices that probably haven't been updated, because like who internally is going to be the guy that sits in front of the board and says, hey, we didn't find any indicators of compromise, but I think we should update this and take down the entire sales network.
Yeah.
Not a very
Just
popular
because.
move.
Yeah. And we're not sure if it'll come back up in time.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Again, right. Going back to those business decisions.
Yeah. All right. I want to move before we wrap here to one more topic of stealth here. From SC Media, we have Trigona ransomware attackers use novel tool for data exfiltration. And basically, they're using a custom built tool to move data out instead of usual public tools like our clone. Those tools are easier to detect. So they built something that can split transfers, rotate connections, target specific files like documents and invoices just stealthily. So this is really, again, about maintaining persistence and going unnoticed. Is the real access event here any kind of initial entry or just the undetected moving of data?
I think it's also like, I don't know why people are surprised that like we update our tools, and we come
Mhm.
with better tools, techniques, and procedures,
Mhm.
and we're like, oh my god, somebody else did that too, and it's like, well, yeah, that's how the world works. They're basically a business, right? Like they
Right.
are in the ransomware business, and like they were like, hey, we were getting snapped on using all these commercial off the shelf tools. Hey, Claude, can you build me a better one? And then it's like, yeah, sure. Like I know how to get stuff out of a network. So I,
Yeah.
I think I think a couple of the cool things that when I read it, where it was like, was it 2 gigs? It would rotate IP, so was harder to find, and then it was also doing like just staying away from like audio and video files to keep from getting detected. I was like, yeah, that's good. That's smart on their point.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, like I don't, without going into any sort of like specifics, like, once upon a time when I was in the military working, like red team type stuff, that when a defender, like when you go to like, do an exercise, the defenders were explicitly looking for specific signatured products and just looking for that, not looking for like the traffic exfil or anything from a heuristic standpoint. They were just looking for those signature based things. And so that was the obvious natural pivot was, well, let's stop using off the shelf stuff and let's just write something in house. And what do you know? All of a sudden, the defenders never were able to catch us. And it's no different here. Like, this is the exact same concept of why use something that everybody else has seen before, even if you like, if it's an open source thing and you just, you recompile it and you resign it yourself, whatever, it's still going to look the same. Of course, attackers are going to, roll their own rats essentially in this case.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's like that's kind of a no brainer. Like I fully expect, like you said, like a competent business in this case, right? That's their business is ransomware. Of course, they're going to use, maybe when they first start out, they're going to use something that's free off, open source or whatever, because they're working on their tradecraft maybe. But once that's down and they're getting popped left and right because they're getting caught by using what everybody else has been using, yeah, write your own thing and, take that out of the equation.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is essentially just kind of observe behaviors more than look for the footprints, so to speak.
Yeah. And
What?
Minor Attack does a good job of calling out these teams of people that do and their tradecraft they use, right? And that's why they update daily, because it is definitely changing. But being able to blend in more with human traffic, because like John was saying, we look for signatures when we're trying to find indicators of compromise. The other thing
Mhm.
is anomalies, right? What's weird that this user's doing that they've never done before? Or what's weird that this thing is doing that's never done before? Why is it calling out to every media file instead of, that no one uses? So yeah, I think I agree with both Shad and John that this is just them up in their game, the next level of business, trying to get bought out.
I think
Gotta
what's
prep for that
interesting
merger.
about it, yeah, I think what's interesting about it too is that we're seeing a combination of techniques, right? So we're seeing the initial access vector on some of these, I'm pretty sure are still that public exploit. But what they're using then once they pivot internally is a custom tool suite. So you're getting that false sense of security once you update, right? And you're like, oh, cool. Well, we're no longer vulnerable to that. We should be fine. But like Shad said earlier, who's checking the rest of the house? You don't just lock the door
Yeah.
and turn the TV on and go about your day. But it is really interesting to see someone out there putting together kind of like a hybrid playbook toolkit and then adapting their style to what they're actually seeing out there.
Yeah. So I think a good summary for this episode feels like don't just lock your door, check the hinges. See if they're still on in the first place. That's the kind of thing that saves your home, so to speak. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insight. As always, John, Dylan, Shad, Richard, very much appreciated. And as always, share this with someone on your team who's thinking about these kinds of problems. Till next week, stay safe.